Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. At their recent 50th anniversary celebration, and I've got the program right here, the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, NWBCCC, announced that they're going Bronx-wide, merging with the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative, reaffirming their collective commitment to building racial justice and economic democracy, little things like that, and improving outcomes in health, housing, education, the environment, and more. The two organizations have a bold agenda in a borough that has been historically underserved in those areas. So tonight, we'll talk with the leaders of those organizations about the merger, their plans, and how they hope to impact the lives of the nearly 1.5 million Bronxites. Please join me in welcoming the Executive Director of the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, Sandra Lobo. Always nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And co-founder of the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative, Yorman Nuñez.
Buenas.
Thank you, sir. Well, Sandra, let's just start with you. You had your 50th anniversary. Let's talk about 50 years and establish for, I don't know who would not know by now, who is NWBCC for 50 years?
Yeah, so we are a 50-year-old grassroots community-led organization, and as you know, we were started in response to redlining and disinvestment in the 70s, and we do grassroots organizing, community organizing around housing, health, education, community and economic development.
Has the mission altered, changed? Have you had to, I'm guessing in 50 years, it's not exactly what it used to be like there in, what was it, 1974. But, you know, what have you had to do? Let's bring it up to date for the 50 years where we were, or where you were, and where you're at now.
Yeah, I love that question, Gary, because in 2012, we actually shifted our mission in response to engagement with the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative. And so it was at that moment.
With Yorman's
with
group.
Jorman, actually, Jorman was one of the
Jorman is how it's pronounced?
Yes.
I don't want to mispronounce.
Jorman's good.
Okay.
And so our organization, our board, our members, our staff underwent an economic democracy training series that BCDI led. And that really had us kind of think about the work that we're doing. We were doing all this powerful organizing, but we're really responding to the things that are happening to our community, right? And so economic democracy trainings invited us to think about how do we actually plan, design, own the future of the Bronx.
That is fascinating to me. I wasn't aware of this till we planned to do this program. So what did they lend to what you had already been doing for, I don't know how many years, 20 years, 30 years? You know?
Yeah. Jorman, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to say that I have been a member of the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition for a long time, since I was 13 years old.
Okay, so nobody's counting.
So even while I was there, it was great learning the organizing skills to become a powerhouse in addressing issues, keeping folks in their homes, stopping school closures, keeping our community safe.
Always frustrating, or were you successful?
We were very successful,
very
I would
successful.
say. Very. I think
fair.
in the organization we've done a lot in schools, a lot with housing organizing, and a lot around trying to make sure that community receives the benefits it deserves when it comes to projects. But while we were doing that, including me, there were just other aspirations I had as well. I didn't want to just force people to do the right thing. What skills could I learn to shape the future of the Bronx as well? So that actually was one of the core motivators for why we started.
So you learned
Bronx
that
Cooperative
from
Development Initiative.
NWBCCC?
I think I learned the skills to protect our community from the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition. And I really had a desire to learn, well, how can we introduce the tools to proactively develop the Bronx, not just force developers to give us the benefits we want, but why can't we become the developers?
My jaw is a little bit dropped here because basically, so you got educated and grew up and learned from NWBCCC, and what we just heard from Sandra is that she is now taking NWBCC and expanding what they do because of what you learned and developed.
Yeah.
Right? It's as incestuous as you can ask for. But look, this is inside. We don't BS around in the Bronx. When I asked you about the relationship between the two organizations, and I said, well, you're collaborative or whatever, and you said it's like family. Yes. It actually is then.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just discovered something. So then again, so what do you lend to NWBCC in this new alignment that they didn't have?
Yeah. BCDI is about asking 3 questions. Why don't we plan it? Why don't we run it? Why don't we own it?
Okay, so let me ask, why don't we plan it?
Why don't we run it? Why don't we own it? Right? It's basically about the development, the economic development strategy, and the strategy for developing the Bronx should include making sure the people of the Bronx are part of planning whatever is happening, are part of running and implementing whatever is happening, and are part of directly benefiting from whatever is happening as well, part of owning what's happening. So those 3 questions and the competencies and the capacities to conceive of projects, and that lens overlaying the organizing work that's happening, that's what we bring.
So when they conceive of a project, whether it be housing, whether it be work with the school or something, you now have like literally a partner as opposed to you and your board and everybody deciding what you want to do, right? This is, we're now defining the new alignment here, right?
Right. I think it's bringing together the different analyses, right? There's the shared analysis around how do we not just organize to defend and protect our folks, but actually support folks to own and design and plan their futures. And so a good example, Gary, is Northwest Bronx has been organizing tenants for 5 decades. And we organize tenants to demand heat and hot water, to basic repairs. And what we have encountered is that decade later, 2 decades later, we'll go back to the same exact buildings for the same exact issues, right? So we're responding to issues, right? We're not eradicating the issues. We're not getting to the root causes of the issues. We are just responding to them. And I think this new analysis allows us to think about, what if tenants owned these buildings? Would they treat themselves this way? Would they displace themselves? And we believe that the landscape would look very different in the Bronx if we're supporting the building of economic democracy.
Land trusts and all those kinds of things.
That's right.
When Yorman was talking about, say those 3 items again.
Why don't we plan it? Why don't we run it? Why don't we own it?
I can't help but think of the number of dialogues you've had and we've had on the Kingsbridge Armory. It seems like that is almost the iconic example of the 3 things he talked about, because when you present the Armory plan to everybody, you're saying it's the whole fundamental concept is it's our Armory.
That's right.
So is that really, in a way, the iconic test for this
Absolutely.
relationship in some ways?
I think we definitely included that analysis in our proposal and in our vision for what should happen in the Kingsbridge Armory. We shouldn't just be getting basic jobs, poverty wage jobs. We should be getting investment. We should be building entrepreneurship. We should be, building ownership.
And ownership, and then of course the content of it, of a building like that, the opportunities are just massive. But then the content, we own it, so we should decide what's in it. Yorman, let's just talk about that project for a moment. What do you see, based on what you've heard? Because I've been to the hearings and the listening sessions and everything else. Where is it at, and what do you think BCDI can bring to this project to assist them and all of us in getting the right thing in that spot?
BCDI has been in partnership with Northwest Bronx for a very long time. I want to say 15. I want to say 15 years or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's been plenty of things that's happened in the past. Things like in the Kingsbridge Armory proposal, both before and now, looking at procurement and local procurement and making sure that whatever gets purchased, manufactured, and whatever services are procured locally and support local businesses. The planning behind that, the rigor behind that, figuring that out, that's the lens to even ask the question, how is wealth being generated here and how do we keep it here, is one of the things we bring.
Because, let me just interject if you would, because then the project is a project, but then you're creating kind of a philosophy, a way of life, a system of doing things that maybe doesn't exist before. I mean, and this project has had that because of the numbers of hearings and meetings and input and listen and viewing sessions, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is what we're trying to do, is create a new way of doing things in the Bronx.
Yeah. Plans help direct investment. and who does the planning matters. A lot of plans don't include community ownership, don't include making sure.
I sit in this seat for 30 years. I know it.
Yeah.
I've heard it all.
So what we're doing, right, is building the capacity for Bronxites to be a part of that planning process, for their aspirations to be captured in those plans, and direct investment to so that's actually what gets developed and here in the borough, so that they shape the trajectory of the Bronx.
And I want to extend this now. So the last time I believe you were here, we also had the Department of City Planning on here, also talking about the Armory. Are you pleased with the way it's going now? Of course, it can never be fast enough. We realize that. But are you pleased? Are we getting somewhere? And do you see the ultimate vision of the Armory coming true in the long run?
I think we're in a waiting game. We're waiting to see what happens. We're very clear about what our commitment is, which is to ensure that the community gets good union jobs, that there's a community ownership component to it, high environmental standards. So whatever happens, whatever the decision is, we're very clear that our organization and our coalition of partners are going to see that through.
Then how does this become, in a way, I don't want to oversell it, but the iconic plan that you would then duplicate maybe in other places? Now, you've been in Cambridge and Fordham and that whole section of maybe as far south as Burnside, I don't know, and that whole section of the Bedford Park. The whole idea here is now it's going to be a borough-wide initiative.
That's right.
Explain how that works, and then you're going to get your chance to.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we want to do is think about how do we bring this lens of building shared wealth and ownership across the borough? Where are the opportunities? Where are the partnerships? Where are the synergies where we can really scale the work that we're doing now? So you mentioned Community Land Trust before, right? So in 2020, we incorporated a Bronx-wide Community Land Trust, and we're building a pipeline of buildings that will be going on this Community Land Trust in our catchment area, but really hope to partner with others to expand that. And we're working on a Bronx-wide economic development plan, actually with the BXEDC, to certify federally a Bronx-wide plan that is grounded in economic democracy.
And the BXEDC is working with you.
Yes.
Which leads right into what my next question was going to be. You know, the borough, which I know, of course, having sat in this seat all these years, the borough is filled with organizations in other neighborhoods that have similar philosophies that you both do, that you have articulated here. It seems to me if you could continue to build coalitions with those, we kind of all may be getting there. So what are your thoughts about this whole idea of expanding what's been done in this part of the Bronx elsewhere?
I think it absolutely makes sense, because this effort, what it has shown is, the federal government looks for regions that are really keen on the strategies that will develop the economy and develop it in the direction it wants to go. So the fact that in partnership with BXEDC, we've been able to get approved a community economic development strategy, which again, at the federal level at least, signals that yes, this is what needs to get funded, this is what should drive investment, and what's in there is community ownership, what's in there is co-governance, what's in there is the things that we've been talking about. It's an additional tool to organizing that will make things impactful.
It's hard to ignore the political realities. Certainly, if you're talking about the federal government, this current or the one coming in may not look at the kind of neighborhood initiatives as enthusiastically as the previous federal government and as you folks. So that's one reality. The other reality is we could be getting a new mayor next year, only a year away. So we're still waiting on some things. Do you have concerns here on both of those?
I think we both have concerns, and as a matter of fact, I'll just say Northwest Bronx has been around 50 years. This will not be the first time. It'll be a difficult environment. It won't be the last time it'll be a difficult environment.
But you're not going to quit.
I'm glad to be able to depend on the political sophistication of an organization like the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition to navigate that well and still deliver for our folks.
Well, one of the things, Sandra, that while you were talking, and you talked about, well, a borough-wide plan, et cetera, and I was thinking about the borough president's office, and the borough president herself is one thing, and then, of course, she's going to be running for re-election as well. We know all that. When you said that the BXEDC, that I'm assuming it's Rob Walsh and Marshall and those folks, and the BXEDC are interested, that heartens me, because that means there's really a chance to be in concert with the borough leadership, which then trickles down to the council, right? I'm right about that?
Absolutely.
And so they've really received the message.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, our partnership was initiated by the BXCDC because Northwest Bronx is part of many faith-based, community-based, and labor institutions that came together to design this long-term plan for the borough. And so they came to us and said, can we partner? Can we pursue this given the history, given the expertise that you all have been doing for the past 5 years? Does this make sense for us to do it together? So we are co-leads on this initiative.
We talked about development and those kinds of issues and the armory. And I'd like to, in the list that I gave at the beginning, which was based on your materials, the notion of health came through. How does that work? And how do you see changing the landscape or improving the landscape, especially for Bronxites who are struggling with many aspects of their health situation?
Yeah, I mean, so at Northwest Bronx.
Excuse me, in a borough where the largest industry is health.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
clear.
an important
Again,
component.
I've been in this seat way too long. Go ahead.
At Northwest Bronx, we use the social determinants of health framework, really. So thinking about beyond personal choice, beyond genetics, there's also environment and social and economic factors that actually influence that. So we believe that when we look at ownership, when we look at stability in your housing, when we look at good jobs, all of those things are factors that actually determine people's health, whether or not you have access to fresh food or fruits or vegetables. All of those things are deeply connected. So we are working on passing health legislation for sure that we want to expand borough-wide to think about ways that can support those health outcomes. But we also want to be comprehensive in our analysis around health, that it's not just personal choice or genetics that impact that.
I think for Yorman, just based on this conversation, you want to have the philosophies and the theories that we just heard from Sandra put into place when decisions are
Let's
made.
develop the plans, the projects. Yes.
Part of this.
Yeah. A concrete example of what Sandra's talking about, for example, the Bronx has some of the highest rates of asthma. Hospitals,
Thanks for bringing
hospitals
that up.
have, are really burdened by so many emergency room visits. Some of those emergency room visits are for asthma, for example. And if you take a traditional health approach, you just attack the symptom. But then if you look at social determinants of health, you'll see that maybe they're living in buildings and they are. Look at what buildings are driving those hospitalizations and go, oh, maybe there's just too many rodents, pets, mold, and other things in those buildings.
Maybe.
It'll be much more impactful for the health of community folks to, in addition, look at, making sure everyone has pumps, making sure that they don't have rodents, pests, or other things that are triggering their asthma and triggering these hospitalizations to improve the population health of the borough. That's a social determinants of health lens and an economic democracy lens, and it's what we want to bring and put real practical plans behind.
It's the same dialogue for so many things, a seat around the table. You want to be able to have somebody in that room. And again, and I will talk to my friends at the BXCDC, the fact that they're involved in that is very good because they have the dialogue with developers, with people who are looking to do stuff in the Bronx. And if they put forth, we want you to do good stuff in the Bronx, but it has to be X, Y, and Z, then I think you would have to say that you're successful at what you do. Can you talk a little, we talked about education, talk about, do you get involved in the schools? Are you, do you talk to principals or teachers about curriculums? I mean, what do you do in schools? And then again, how do you have that dialogue further now that we have this relationship?
Yeah, so I helped create our economic democracy training series, and I would love for that to be institutionalized in schools as a way for folks to think about how do we develop our economy. But for right now, grassroots organizations that do organizing, that connect with people, have training, and that curriculum is used in that training to help folks formulate their thoughts.
Outside of schools, or this is, you get it incorporated in curriculum?
In organizing, so like in practice, so like we're trying to resolve an issue. Let's develop our lens around those three questions. How do we run it? How do we plan it? Right? How do we own it? And is the fact that we're not creating the issues that we're fighting against, and if the fact that we can a viable solution to the issues that we're at. That's what the training series helps you think about.
Sandra, I have a terrible question for you. Is it? I mean, all these ideas, we're hearing them, we talk about them, even the vision of the armory and everything else. Is it frustrating / difficult to really make them come true? And then I'm thinking this out while I'm talking to you. And then is it then possible with greater association with other Bronx community organizations that maybe you can finally really have forward energy where it's been maybe difficult in some areas in the past?
Absolutely. The issues that we're tackling are being planned and designed on borough level and regional area. So if we're doing work on a neighborhood level, we're really not getting to the root cause of tackling those forces. So partnering, which we're already doing, partnering with organizations across the Bronx and scaling that capacity will help us with this Bronx-wide plan and other projects that we're working on, allows us to be able to design, fundraise, and secure investment that can actually help us move this forward.
I was just thinking about this whole concept and then the political realities that are out there. In New York State to some degree, but really I feel like with all the people I talk to in the Bronx, we've really just trying to create, in a way, our own little world of people who think in these ways, who understand our history, the redlining that which founded NWBCCC, and all the other issues. I feel like there's like a culture developing that is isolated from that. Not to say that we don't want federal funding and federal support and the right legislation, but the feel that, I mean, that's what I'm feeling from this conversation, that there's like a world here of real forward movement that the rest of the world doesn't fully grasp yet.
I certainly feel we're ahead of the game all the time. So if that's what you're talking about, I think we're on the cutting edge and ahead all the time.
I'm Bronx prejudiced, I get that.
But one of the things I do see, though, is across the aisle, across all different ways of thinking, when you talk about local ownership, everyone seems to want to support that. No one's really against that. No. Find someone who says no, right? When you're about those things. So I think we're both ahead of the game, and what we're talking about is deeply resonant with everyone. Right. Which is why I'm glad that you also see it when Sandra was like, yeah, BXEDC is on board. Why not?
Difficult for me to understand it. So what is next? Like, what do you pick up? I don't want to single out organizations, but do you pick up phones and call other organizations? Do you, I mean, in terms of this next step, I mean, from NWBCCC to a wider, audience to a wider collaborative.
Yeah, way ahead of you. We're already having conversations
there's
with
the
our
media
partner.
again, following them down the block.
We're already in conversations with partners and strategizing about what does it look like to scale this work, and specifically coordination and collaboration across the board. There's some really great work happening, and we're excited to be partnering and supporting and scaling the capacity.
It wouldn't be me if I didn't ask you. You want to give us a sample? Do you want to name people or organizations?
Sure. I mean, if you just look if we look at the Bronx-wide coalition group of folks that we've been working with the last 5 years, we have, Bronx Bethany in the East Bronx. We have, Mothers on the Move. We have the Point CDC. There's folks across the whole borough that share this racial justice and economic democracy vision that are, thinking about how do we move this forward? How do we scale the capacity? And I think bringing the organizing strength and expertise of Northwest Bronx and the planning and economic development capacity of BCDI together under the same umbrella to scale, that's really exciting about what's possible.
People know iconic places, so just think of NWBCCC and the Point actually working together. That is, for me, a very exciting prospect. Obviously, we know the people down there in Hunts Point. We know the amazing work that they do, and we know what you do. Putting them together, for you, you are excited.
That's been the vision. That's been the main motivation for why bringing the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative together in the first place. So yeah, absolutely.
After the show, I obviously deal with a lot of organizations. I know a lot of organizations that would say, I would have that conversation. I think that, and then funding, I mean, is there monies for these things, or you do it conceptually and then project by project? You deal with that all the time.
Absolutely. I think a real challenge for us in the past has been that in the Bronx we have a lot of neighborhood level organizations, so to really secure scaled investment is challenging for small organizations. So we're hoping that this can be a catalyst to really invite more investment that can be shared across organizations that have this vision. So I think that's something that we're devising a plan around. And what you said earlier, I think there are some concerns around the new administration federally and what does that mean in terms of this. But either way, we're full speed ahead. We're excited about what's possible.
I mean, we have all different kinds of conversations here in this program. This one is a very interesting one because it's a visioning session for me. Imagine all the groups that we have on here and all the other programs, and imagine them being together around an issue, whether it's something going on in the hospital system or availability of healthcare services or something going on in the Board of Ed, and then having as many in the Bronx moving forward, talking to the borough president, and then of course getting down to City Hall and saying, look, the entire borough believes this. The shoreline on the South Bronx, which we've covered enough, which is just ridiculous. The East Bronx shoreline, what's going on in City Island and Northwest Bronx, and realizing we have more in common than we are, right?
That's right.
How do people contact? You have an event coming up, right? We have the flyer for that event. Here it is, the Bronx-wide Coalition Public Meeting.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity to get a sense of the collaboration that's already happening across the Bronx. They'll learn more about the comprehensive economic development strategy that we're moving forward on. So people should come check it out, and we'd love
there
to
it is.
have them.
It's at La Central on those dates. Sandra Lobo, great. Thank you. I'm going to tell her, keep going, but she don't even need to do it. And the same thing with you, Yorman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
NWBCCC and the Bronx Community Development Initiative, like this, and then they're going to go like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, we thank our producers, Rebecca Hemick, our director, Will Guzman, Urelis Encarnacion is on graphics, Ian Neville, the audio. Editor is Yenelsida Diaz. We have a cast of thousands working with us here in the studio. And of course, to you too, the people of the Bronx, we love you. And if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, I'll be here next week. Good night. Happy holidays. We're in that season. Happy holidays, everybody.